You're watching the History Fella channel, and in this video we're looking at the Battle of Camp Wildcat. The Battle of Camp Wildcat, also known as Wildcat Mountain and Camp Wildcat, was one of the early engagements of the American Civil War. It occurred October 21st, 1861, in northern Laurel County, Kentucky, during a campaign known as the Kentucky Confederate Offensive, or Operations in Eastern Kentucky, 1861. The battle is considered one of the first Union victories of the Civil War and marked the second engagement of troops in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. On April 15, 1861, at the outbreak of the Civil War, President Abraham Lincoln called upon states remaining in the Union to provide volunteers to suppress the insurrection in the 7 states. Pro-Confederate Kentucky Governor Beriah McGoffin refused to send troops, but since the majority of the members of the Kentucky General Assembly were pro-Union, Lincoln's call for volunteers did not prompt the state to secede. On May the 16th, a Kentucky Legislative Committee recommended that the state remain neutral in the conflict, and Governor McGoffin proclaimed the state's neutrality on May the 20th. In elections on August the 5th, 1861, Kentucky voters returned a veto-proof majority of pro-Union members to the House of Representatives and the Senate. On August 6, 1861, Camp Dick Robinson, a Union camp, was established near Lexington. On September 2, 1861, the Kentucky General Assembly raised the U.S. flag over the Kentucky state capitol at Frankfort. On September 3, 1861, Confederate Major General Leonidas Polk ordered Brigadier General Gideon Pillow to seize Columbus, Kentucky on the Mississippi River before Union forces could do so. This ended Kentucky's neutrality, led to the Union Brigadier General Ulysses S. Grant's seizure of Paddock, Kentucky on September 6, 1861, and other military movements and actions by both Union and Confederate armies in Kentucky soon afterwards. Brigadier General Felix Zollicoffer's Confederates had moved from Tennessee to push from the Cumberland Gap into central Kentucky in an effort to gain control of the important border state. On September 14, 1861, 10 days after his 5,500-man force left their base, Zollicoffer occupied the Cumberland Gap and took a position at the Cumberland Ford, which is near present-day Pineville in Kentucky, to counter Unionist activity in the area. This was where Union supporters had been organizing and training recruits from Kentucky and East Tennessee at Camp Andrew Johnson near Barberville, Kentucky. On September 19, 1861, Zollicoffer sent 800 men under Colonel Joel Battle against Camp Andrew Johnson, which had largely been vacated, with the Union recruits being moved to nearby Camp Dick Robinson, where several thousand Federal troops were gathered under the command of Brigadier General George H. Thomas. As Battle's men approached Camp Johnson, they met a force of 300 pro-Union Home Guards under Captain Isaac J. Black, who hastily removed the planking from the bridge to prevent the Confederates from crossing it. Sharp skirmishing broke out, but Battle's superior numbers prevailed, and Zollicoffer's Confederates drove off Battle's men, with the Union force suffering 1 killed, 1 wounded, and 13 captured, and the Confederates losing 7 dead. His men seized the camp, destroyed the buildings, and captured the arms and equipment left behind by the retreating recruits. Although Zollicoffer briefly withdrew to his camp at Cumberland Ford, he sent a detachment of his men to drive off another Union Home Guard force at the camp at Laurel Bridge in Laurel County, Kentucky. On September the 28th, another Confederate detachment seized 200 barrels of salt and destroyed the Goose Creek Salt Works in Clay County, Kentucky. They returned to camp at Cumberland Fort on September the 30th. On October the 16th, Zollicoffer returned to the offensive in an effort to move into central Kentucky. In response to Zollicoffer's actions, Union Brigadier General Thomas sent troops under Colonel Theophilus T. Garrard to set up Camp Wildcat at Rock Castle Hills near London, Kentucky, at the base of Wildcat Mountain, 30 miles north of the salt works, in order to secure the ford of the Rock Castle River and to obstruct the Wilderness Road passing through the area. Colonel Garrard informed General Thomas that he did not receive reinforcements and he'd have to retreat. He reported he was outnumbered 7-1. Thomas sent Brigadier General Albin F. Schlupp with what amounted to a brigade of men to Colonel Garrard, bringing the total Union force to about 7,000. Schloff arrived on October the 20th, 1861, a day before Zollicoffer moved against the camp. The Union force awaited Zollicoffer's Confederate troops, who had to pass the stronghold at Camp Wildcat to proceed into the central Kentucky. Zollicoffer was unaware that the camp had been reinforced, and further mistook a column of Union reinforcements arriving during the afternoon of October the 20th as the entire Union force preparing for battle. Union pickets skirmished with the Confederates on the evening of October the 20th and returned to camp to report that a large Confederate force was nearby. As the Confederates started up the Wilderness Road on the morning of October the 21st, General Schlupp moved 4 companies of the 33rd Indiana Infantry Regiment, 350 men, at 3/4 of a mile to the east of Camp Wildcat to Round Hill, a steep high point along the road. Confederate pickets attacked the Union force just as they arrived at Round Hill, but the Confederates soon withdrew to report the situation to General Zollicoffer. Zollicoffer sent most of 2 regiments, the 11th Tennessee, and several companies of the 7th Tennessee, to attack the Union detachment at Round Hill. Just before the attack, the companies from the 33rd Indiana were reinforced by 250 men of the 1st Kentucky Volunteer Cavalry Regiment and a small number of Home Guards. The Confederate regiments attacked the steep hill, but after an hour of fighting, the 11th Tennessee Infantry retreated. Soon thereafter, Union reinforcements arrived, forcing the 17th Tennessee Infantry to retreat as well. Zollicoffer then sent 29th Tennessee Infantry Regiment and several companies of the 17th Tennessee Infantry to attack a location called the South Rim, across the road from Round Hill. By then the Union had fortified this point, and the Confederate attack on this point also failed. Later the Confederates failed to detect a gap between the 33rd Indiana and the 7th Kentucky Volunteer Infantry Regiment, before Colonel Garrard sent regiments to close it. With casualties mounting to no effect, Zollicoffer ceased attacking the Union position. The Confederates withdrew during the night. They continued their retreat to Cumberland Fort, which they reached on October the 26th. Union casualties were 5 killed and 20 wounded, while the Confederates suffered 11 killed and 42 wounded or missing. After Union Army defeats earlier in the year, especially at the Battle of Big Bethel and the First Battle of Bull Run, and on the same day as the Battle of Bull's Bluff, a Union victory was welcomed in the North. In November, the Union force completed the Big Sandy expedition. This set the stage for the Battle of Mill Springs and the death of General Zollicoffer on January the 19th, 1862. If you found the information in this video informative, please feel free to like it and subscribe to the channel.